If anxiety has ever held you back from reaching your full potential, this episode is about to change everything. Hey guys, so today we are here with Bradley. I'm so excited. We have so much to talk about. We are mostly going to be focusing on rewiring anxiety for success and how you can go from, just being an anxious mess, as I'm sure we all can relate to, and using that in both your, I would say, personal and professional life, to just advance in all ways. We love a self-growth over here, so I'm so excited to hear about Bradley's perspective.
I love it. Well, first off, thank you so much, Stella, for having me on. We were just talking before we started recording, and obviously this is a podcast more focused towards, women's issues, mental health, mindset, things like that. And first off, as you may or may not be able to tell from totally voice, raging gay over here, no. But I take a lot of pride, actually, professionally. I work with mostly women, and I take a lot of pride in just more of a feminine, I would say, leadership, but also just conversation style and kind of skill set and things like that. And so, I've made a lot of Instagram content and things on how being, gay is actually a superpower versus, what a lot of people might think. And so I just want to say super grateful to be on the show and hope to provide a lot of insights. So anyways, a little bit of background on myself as it relates to, Stella, what you said about just anxiety and kind of creating patterns and behaviors that will improve your life personally and professionally. Currently live in New York City, like Stella, and moved here about 18 months ago. If you had met me I would say 5, 6, 7 years ago and guess what my future would look like, it would not be this. I was a complete and utter mess. I grew up having an extraordinarily anxious attachment to my parents, and that was as a result of just a lot of healing that they needed to do on their part that unfortunately, didn't really take accountability for or weren't able to really do at that time, and really went through a period where, pushed them away, cut them off, and have since repaired that relationship, thankfully. But essentially what I got from that is moving out at the age of 19. I'm 26 now, but moving out at 19, having no context, no frame, no understanding of who I am or who I wanted to be. And so literally building a person from the ground up is not to be dramatic, but that's literally kind of how I look at it, and honestly how it felt. I, started going to therapy and advocating for myself a lot there. Over the last year, a couple of years, I've really found a passion in my own content. I'm very active on Instagram and LinkedIn. I found a really big passion in my own content for speaking about very tactical things when it comes to mental health, emotional regulation, self-preservation, thoughts, mindset. I find that a lot of the mental health content online is so abstract and it's so woo-woo, and it's so, if you want to do the hard thing, just go make evidence that you can do the hard thing and job done and snap, snap. But it's like, hang on, back up. How do I actually do the hard thing if A, I don't want to do the hard thing, and B, I have no context for how I can start to do the hard thing? So nobody gets granular about it. And I shouldn't say nobody, more and more people are starting to, but that's really where I love to have conversations and create content, is getting really granular about that. And because I need things simple. Like, I overthink everything anyways, so I need things simple. So I'm like, I just needed a way to understand all the complexity and put it in frameworks that I can understand. So anyways, in all of my content and in reaching out to you, Stella, I was like, my goal for 2025 is I wanted to be on 25 podcasts, just talking about this and just sharing what I've learned, but also, I'll be completely honest, putting myself in these situations and challenging myself to think more about this is also the best way for me to learn. So totally selfishly motivated here. So I'm really excited to be on the show, and excited to dive in. So it's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. Yeah, that is totally aligned with everything. As far as anxiety, overthinking, I think these are such common issues, especially in our generation. And we need those tips and tricks, because it's true. Like, you do hear very abstract kind of concepts, or it's so easy when you see an Instagram infographic or something. It's easy, it's simple. It's just 3 steps, but it's not always like that, especially when you do have, stuff from your childhood or just from your past that's still in there. So, there's so much to dive into, but I think one of my first questions for you is, what habits or kind of mindset skills or shifts did you first kind of start to implement to make changes on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a good place to start is, you might have heard, people listening to this might have heard of or this idea of fight or flight. I just want to preface this, I am not a trained mental health person. I am not a psychiatrist, anything like that. But I have spent a lot of time obviously dealing with anxiety and studying research articles and things on fight or flight. And I want to kind of walk you through what my experience has been of it, but also why I think it's really important as a great starting point or kind of supplementary resource to understand it to help others with anxiety in their journey. So essentially, for a little bit of context, I got into a very serious relationship about 18 months ago when I moved to New York, still with him. He's amazing. And that brought up a lot of undiscovered, limiting beliefs that I had about myself and worth and relationship and, what I deserved and what I needed in a relationship and asking for it, etc. So that is really when I would say a lot of anxiety, not necessarily resurfaced, but a lot of things came up that I just didn't know were there. And I kind of got to this point where I was like, crap, I'm having a lot of panic. Like this was literally months ago. I'm having panic attacks almost every day. I'm having this self-doubt and self-criticism that I haven't experienced since I was a kid. Like, what is going on? And so I started, went back to therapy, still in therapy. We'll continue to do it. We love a good therapist. What I realized, and again, I wish I had understood this as a kid, or I wish I had, looked into it as a kid, but it's like, you're a kid, you don't know what to do.
Right.
You don't know what to do, you just know to freak out.
Yeah.
What I started to realize is, these things kind of came back as an adult, is that fight or flight is actually a really, really interesting phenomenon that I think appears in so much more prevalence than we realize. So the idea of what fight or flight is that it's two different evolutionary survival responses that we have to stressful, to difficult situations. The fight is to stay there, stick it out, hold firm, embrace the pain, endure the pain, feel the pain, wait for it to pass, do it because it's going to be gone soon. That's the energy behind fight. Flight is the energy behind, I'm going to try and change what this is. I'm going to run away from it. I'm going to take this thought, this thing I'm worried about, and I'm going to try and think of all the reasons why I shouldn't actually be worried about it. I'm going to try and manipulate this thing to be something else. That's the energy behind flight. And, there's a lot of context and kind of deeper things inside each of those, but on a very general level. So I realized that I kind of went through, I actually did a personal podcast episode on this, and I realized I was kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I went through this phase of trying to fight it, and I went through this phase of trying to fly away from it. And then I was like, once I tried those and realized that both of those didn't work, I was like, okay, wait, there's got to be something else. And that's where, honestly, a word I really love to use is surrender to it. So all of that being said, really long story to set all that up, is basically I was having these panic attacks, realizing that my relationship with myself and with how I related to myself in the context of being in a relationship with somebody else needed some work. And so, when these panic attacks would come up, I was thinking and sitting there, my first instinct was flight. So I actually went the other way first. So flight and then fight. My first instinct was flight. I was like trying to think my way through it. I was like, oh, if I think this way, if I try and sit here and think and remember, ooh, has this ever killed me before? No. Has this, what's all the evidence that I can use to say that this won't actually kill me? Oh, well, I have a ton of evidence. Oh, I can try and think that I'm stronger than this. I can outlast this. I can do it. Like, I was trying all of the things you see online and trying all of the, think this phrase, this thing, this thought pattern. None of it was working. It always just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. The panic and the fear and all the feelings and everything. And then eventually, after, a little bit of therapy, getting back into therapy, I realized I didn't realize at the moment, but I started to fight it then. I started to be like, I literally remember where I had like an 8-hour long panic attack one day. I shit you not, it was awful.
Stop.
No,
Oh
really.
my God.
I was out in the city with my boyfriend, and it was awful because I was just finished a therapy session the day before where I realized that I was doing the flight. And then I didn't realize that kind of the next thing I wanted to, let's say, try, because I think this is an experimentative process, right? So the next thing I wanted to try was to fight. And so I was like, okay, no, I'm going to fight it. I'm going to face it. I'm going to look at it. I'm not going to run. I'm going to sit here and be strong and be brave and hold it and hold on. And it was painful as...
I can't imagine.
I was literally holding so much physical pain in my body. And my breathing was off, and it was just, I'm sweating, and it was just awful. And so I very quickly realized with that one, okay, this isn't going to work either. So all that to be said, then once I realized the manifestation of the fight or flight response and how I was dealing with that, it really gave room then for me to acknowledge that, okay, cool, those are options, but those are not my only options. Essentially, that is my body's reaction, but I can train my body to have a different reaction. I can teach myself how to have a different reaction. And so I think a couple of the kind of things that came out of that have really, really, really helped me are, I like to use this analogy of hot and cold showers. So whenever you get in the shower, and you turn the water hot, or you turn it, let's say warm first, right? What happens? You turn it warm and then you stay in it for a minute or two, and then what happens? It gets a little bit colder because your body adjusts to the warm temperature. So then you have to turn up the heat. Then you're like, okay, I have to do this to become warm again. And then the same thing happens. You get a little cold, and then you turn it up again, you get warm again. What happens when you jump into the cold water? What happens when you choose to say, no, I'm going to jump into this cold water? You do a cold plunge, you do something, whatever. Your body adjusts. So what I realized, so to use that analogy, is choice. First off, what I realized is that choice has so much at play here. Even if you can just claim the idea that I am choosing what I feel. I might not like what I feel, but I'm choosing and I'm taking power in it. For me personally, and it's really all I can speak to, just my experience. For me personally, that created so much optionality and then how I dealt with it. Because it wasn't like this was happening to me. It's that I could take this and do something with it. Whenever I tried the fight or flight situation, both of those things felt like they were happening to me. I was either running or I was bracing. With this, when I get a choice, it for me created a sense and a foundation of confidence, because then if I could choose what to do next, I therefore then was able to have confidence in what direction I was going to go, because of course I'm not going to choose something that I don't see working out. So I think that was a really good foundational kind of level or place to start with kind of this. The other thing that really helped with this, with and I'm speaking like very specifically just those moments of really angst and just panic and fear, and those moments where feelings are just so big, is I stopped expecting it to feel good, or I stopped expecting for it to be over. A lot of things that you'll see online will say, this is only temporary, that feelings are fleeting. And I agree with that 100%. Feelings are absolutely fleeting. This will not last forever. But when you're in that moment and you're spiraling and your head is going nuts at 1,000,000 miles an hour, that doesn't help. And so what I realized is that when I stop asking for it to go away, when I say, listen, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to observe the feelings I have. And this doesn't even just apply to the intense moments. This can also be, just everyday, mundane, just general feelings of uncertainty or doubt or just discomfort. I'm going to allow it to be there. I'm going to carry it with me. A person I got this from, Layla Hermosi, so I have to give credit for her to this. She says she carries it in her purse. I don't carry a purse. So I like to say I'll carry it I'll carry my wallet. If you carry it, you observe it. Instead of asking it to go away, you say, no, I'm going to put it in my pocket and I'm going to keep it with me here. I'm not actually asking it to do anything. It can do whatever the hell it wants to do. I'm okay with that. I'm going to keep on living as if this is never going to go away. Because what happens then is that you come to terms with it. And I can get more into in terms of like how to actually do that, but you come to terms with it and you stop expecting for it to go away. You stop expecting it to feel good. And I think over time, that comes back to the last thing which I'll mention, which is over time, you don't get better at shooing it away, at moving away from the discomfort. You get better at handling it. So the discomfort and anxiety and fear and uncertainty about whatever is happening in your life, you will always feel that way. People have been interviewed who are worth millions and millions and millions, billions of dollars. And using that measure of let's say professional or honestly even personal success, they don't have any less fear, any less anxiety, any less uncertainty than you do. They're just really good at handling it. And the goal, I think so many people immediately have, and again, this is this fight or flight, is to do something with it. But when you stop trying to do something with it and stop reacting to it and start using it to propel yourself forward, I think that changes the game for everything.
How would you say, almost energetically, the differences between facing it in terms of being in a fight response and carrying it around with you in that way that you're describing? And I feel like you kind of explained, but even just energetically, practically speaking, how would you say
Absolutely.
the difference?
So when you're fighting it, I think the thing that comes up, and again, I want to lead with the context of saying that this might look different and probably does look different from person to person. I'm just going to give you my experience, what I've felt. For me, the feeling that comes up the most when I'm in a fight response is denial. Seeing it there, but I'm denying that it has impact on me, or I'm denying that I need to acknowledge the impact. I'm denying that I have to deal with it. I'm saying it's there. I'm leaving the door closed though. It's sitting there knocking at my door, and I'm just going to let it keep knocking and get louder, but I'm not going to deal with it. I'm going to go keep doing whatever I'm doing. That's the energy that I feel when it's fight mode. When I'm letting it in, I'm opening the door, I'm letting it do whatever it wants. It's going to mess up the couch, maybe. But I know that all that's fixable. I know that at the end of the day, my house isn't going to burn down. I know that everything's going to be fine. The kids are going to be okay. Like it's this sense of knowing that whatever happens, no matter what happens, this hard thing that I'm encountering, I don't need it to go away. I'm still here. And I think a really good way I like to think about this is like I like to think of feeling versus observing. So it's very, very difficult to get outside of yourself when you're feeling really, really intense things. It's just like, you're overwhelmed and you're stressed and you're whatever it is. It's so difficult to not let that just sink you down. But a really good visualization I love to use to help with this is, I was when I was a kid, you can probably resonate with this. Hopefully, when you watch those cartoons, Tom and Jerry, or the stuff like that, right? And there's like the little ghosts comes up out of the body, like your little spirit or whatever, and
Yeah.
it, like, starts doing around and thing while the body's sitting there doing whatever it's doing. That's how I live. Literally, the visualization I use is I'm like I think of myself, whatever situation I'm in. Like if I'm talking with somebody and a feeling of something that I don't want or uncertainty or panic or something comes up, I will literally sit there and think about for whatever reason, it's like my right side here. I don't know, maybe the right side of my thing. I just like that side better. I don't know. But I literally think of myself looking at myself from this angle right here. And I'm like, I see that that's happening there. And that's okay. I'm going to let it happen there. But the me that's here, that has rationale, has logic, that has confidence in myself, that's not going anywhere. Like, you don't need to make space for feeling crappy at the cost of yourself, at the cost of your own confidence in yourself, at the cost of your assuredness in yourself. That space is unlimited if you allow it to be. This is not work on traditional math. This is not like 100%. If I'm feeling 100% shitty, there's no room for me to feel actually okay. That's not how it works. You can feel 1,000% shitty, but then you can feel 10,000% to know that I got this and I'm going to be okay. And you don't kind of allow it to get your goat, so to say, and say like, oh my gosh, start that spiraling of thinking. You remain present with it. It's not about doing it without it. It's not about waiting for it to go away. It's about doing the thing you want to do while feeling the way you're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful. And that kind of goes into another question I have, which is how can you shift your perspective if, I think, especially, as you mentioned previously, when old feelings or anxiety or panic kind of comes back at a certain time in your life. And sometimes it's like, I thought I dealt with this. And it just kind of brings you down a little because it's like, am I going backwards?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two things. There's two things there in what you said. One is the guilt or the punishment that comes up, kind of that self-inflicted, like, what's wrong with me? The other is an uncertainty about, well, crap, if this can happen to me now, like, who's to say that this isn't like the rest of my life, that this isn't going to keep happening? Like, oh my gosh, what happens? And so it's almost like there's this like backwards thinking and then there's this like forward future anxiety.
Yeah, that's so true.
So I'll deal with those kind of separately. So as far as the backwards thinking, so the kind of past oriented thinking, like I thought I had this all figured out essentially. I think the thing that I learned most going through my experience with this is that an aura of an energy of self-confidence and self-preservation will get you everywhere with this. And what I mean by that is that it's very, very easy to buy into whatever your brain is telling you. It's very, very easy to be like, oh my gosh, this is so messed up. I'm messed up. I can't do this because I'm just whatever. But you have to ask yourself on a practical level, when and how has that ever served me? What serves me? What will move me toward where I want to go? So I've done in a past life, let's say, a couple years ago, really, I did some fitness coaching. I built a bit of my personal brand based around fitness coaching, took on a couple clients, decided it wasn't really something I was long-term interested in, and then I stopped. But something that I dealt with clients so often is that they wanted to punish themselves for not eating properly the day before, or let's say they didn't go to the gym the day before, they didn't eat the way they wanted to before. They would punish themselves by running twice as long on the treadmill the next day, by eating, I don't know, salad the next day because they're like, oh my God, I ate junk food. I need to like reverse, the calories, whatever. When you associate your past mistakes with a present punishment, you don't allow yourself any room for error. If you say to yourself subconsciously in that situation for that person, who didn't eat right the past day, didn't work out, didn't whatever when they promised themselves they would. If you say to yourself, then every time that I do that, I'm going to punish myself by doing X and Y and Z, which are things I don't want to do or things I wouldn't normally do. You're essentially asking yourself to be perfect. You're asking yourself to never F up again. You're asking yourself to be completely unrealistic and unhuman and be infallible. And that's just not the case. So building up, I think an if-then confidence is what I like to call it. A confidence of saying, if this thing happens, then I do this. If I don't go to the gym the day before, that's okay. Then I'm going to do this. And you make it at a time when you're very objectively driven and not, subjective and really down on yourself and everything. You make it at a time when you're like, listen, if I don't go to the gym the day before, I'm going to go and I'm going to do exactly what I would have done the very next day. And then maybe I'm going to take an extra 15-minute walk. And that's going to be it, because the punishment won't actually get me anywhere for it. So all of that being said, back to the thing of like anxiety and, you know, the mental health piece, punishment gets you exactly nowhere. I think it's just a lesson perhaps that we all need to learn at points, is that it's truly never about the destination. It's about the process of getting there. And it's like as soon as you think the process is over, I think that's when the real shit happens. That's when the real stuff begins. And the punishment and the shame and the guilt and the negative association that you give to that moment, I think makes or breaks how quickly you can then pivot and move forward. So I think the best answer, I would say, quote unquote, I would give to that is become aware of how, if, and when you have a negative association to effing up, because you will F up. That is completely inevitable. Always. You will always have horrible days. You will always have times where things aren't exactly what you thought they were going to be. Like, things in life happen more like we don't want them to be than it happens how we do want it to be. So it's not your association with what happens when it goes right. It's how you deal with it when it goes wrong, and training yourself to address yourself with a sense of grace with that. On the future flipping side then, if like, oh my gosh, and again, just at least for me, I was like, when this came back up, I was like, crap, I thought I had this figured out. This was like a box I checked. I was done. I was out of therapy. I was all fixed. I was all put back together. Like 18 years of messed up and toxicity was all done. Yay, awesome. Honestly, I was really, it took a good few months for me to really rebuild that confidence again, that I would be able to progress forward, like with just life and business in general, because I really had that shock moment where I was like, crap, I thought I had this figured out and I really don't. And I don't think it was so much the shock that I didn't have it figured out, but it was the shock that I had so much confidence that I did. So it really just shook the whole foundation of a lot of what I thought about myself. And so in building that back up and not looking at this like past, like literally day by day, still to this day, building that back up, I think the thing that brings me through it the most, especially on the hard days, and this goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, is I'm no longer looking at myself from a lens of how can I create my life around or without my feelings, but it's how can I create a life with my feelings. If let's say worst case scenario, if I was to feel this way, this crappy way, whatever thought or thing is going through your head, for me it's just that panic attack. A lot of my anxiety is really oftentimes intense, so it'll manifest in a panic attack. If I was to live in a constant state of panic for the rest of my life, what would I do? And it's just like, it's a scary question, but to address the question, what would I do? And for me, the answer is I would rest when I needed to. Like, I'm really going into this like tactically. I would rest when I needed to. I would take very good care of myself, which I know that I do. I would be very careful what I committed to and my social responsibilities. I would, if it was as intense as, whatever I was imagining it, consult someone to ask about it, but I wouldn't die. My life would progress. My life would up. Now, of course, is that going to happen? I mean, knock on wood, no. But some version of that, sure, it will. I have yet to experience the most awful days of my life, but I also have yet to experience the most amazing days of my life. And being okay with waking up in the morning and with either of those things happening or anything in between is a skill, and is something that I think people can learn if you stop expecting for the bad thing to go away, but you get better at dealing with the bad thing. So I think that's how I would address kind of the future worry or future concern about what happens after, a pivot, or what happens after maybe a setback, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I really like that. As far as the punishment aspect, I feel like people, those of us that struggle with perfectionism and kind of always wanting to like do better, be better, how would you recommend going about finding the balance between getting out of your comfort zone and kind of purposely like making yourself uncomfortable or doing something that maybe you don't want to do because it's like long-term beneficial? Balancing that with knowing when you need to take a rest, because I think also for someone who struggles with perfectionism, sometimes almost the resting can feel like getting out of your comfort zone, but it's like a different feeling. So have you had experience with that, and any tips?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing that comes to mind, and I love conversations about like basically what the root of this is like, how do I do hard things? Like essentially is
Yeah,
what,
literally.
yeah, no, like really, like just to put it at a super simple level. And I actually freaking love talking about this because I feel like every time I talk about it, I learn something new. So I'm really curious to get your thoughts on this too. So the best thing I've found thus far with this is one phrase, super simple. When you do hard things often, everything becomes easy.
Mm.
And so I think there's an element of training yourself to look at the hard things, not criticizing yourself because it's hard, not criticizing yourself because you don't want to do it and you feel that you should. You feel guilt around. You're thinking like, oh, I should want to do this. I should want to get up off my ass and go do this thing. And you're very self-criticism and I think it starts with being curious about what would it feel like to get up off the couch and go do this thing right now. I don't know what it feels like to get up off the couch and to go. I don't know what when you think about you're like, how do I get up? How do I go do this thing when I'm like feel like I should or take a rest or whatever? What are you thinking of? So we'll shoot you an example.
Honestly, a big thing for a long time was like having guests on the podcast. Because I was
Okay.
like, I don't feel qualified enough. I don't feel like anyone's gonna want to be on it.
So I would say it would be very, very, very easy to kind of step into that. I don't feel qualified. I think I don't believe, or rather I'm going to believe the fear. I'm going to believe the feeling because you get a choice in what you believe. I'm going to believe the feeling, the fear, the thought that's telling me I'm not qualified to have guests on the podcast, and this would be a waste of their time, that this wouldn't be something that they'd be interested in. This wouldn't be something that my audience would be interested in. You can believe all of that. But again, it's not about ignoring or not having those thoughts. It's about getting better at dealing with them. So because honestly, as the podcast grows, God willing, as you become more influential, you're going to have more of those thoughts. They're not going away. They're only going to get bigger. So your ability to deal with them has to get better as well. So what I would say is that A, get curious. Get curious about what would it feel like to have one guest on the podcast per month? What would that do for my audience? What would that do for me? What would that do for the guest? What would that feel like? Would I feel feel heard? Would I feel valued? Would the guest feel heard? Would the guest feel valued? Literally just approaching it from a thing of like, ooh, I don't know what that would feel like. Because you're making, whenever you criticize yourself, you're making so many assumptions. You're assuming that it would feel awful. You're assuming that it wouldn't be a valuable time for them. You're assuming it wouldn't be valuable for your audience. You're assuming that they wouldn't want to come on the show. All of those assumptions, I would say, are completely unfounded and completely incorrect. Yet it doesn't stop it from entering
Yeah.
your brain, and that's okay. That's how it should. We're built to survive. We are not built to thrive. We have to train ourselves to thrive. And so I would say it just starts with curiosity. What would it feel like to have somebody else on the show at a particular cadence? What would this feel like? Like, I don't know. If I do it and then it feels shitty, great. Then I have more information and then I can choose my next step. So I would say the curiosity thing is the biggest one of the biggest shifts. Another thing that I think is really, really key is that I think people very oftentimes will set goals, aspirations for themselves, outcomes, outputs for their life. They'll base it on what they want to achieve. They won't base it on the person they want to become. So using using the podcast as an example, if you say, I want to have one guest on the podcast a month, that's an outcome that you will achieve. And for the record, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having that goal or any other outcome-based goal. Yet, when you think about that, and when you try and kind of work your way backwards and breaking down the action steps, like, okay, to get one guest on the podcast a month, I'd have to do like this many outreach, and I'd have to have this many conversations, and da. You're almost giving yourself permission to feel worried about every single one of those things. When you have and create input-based goals, so instead of saying, I'm going to have one person on the podcast a month, your goal is, I'm going to send out 10 messages to people asking if they'd be interested on the podcast. When you achieve that goal, you can feel effing fantastic because you achieved that goal. That was your goal. Those inputs will lead you to the bigger thing that you want to do. I'm not saying don't want to do the bigger thing. I'm saying look at it a different way. So an example I like to use a lot is I'm going to just go back to the gym. Instead of the goal of I want to lose 20 pounds, there's so many things that could impact your ability to lose 20 pounds. There's what you eat. There's how you think about yourself. There's how you exercise. There's how you sleep. Like all of these things. And same with the podcast. There's so many things that will influence and impact how many, who, when this comes on the podcast. Like it's almost to the point where it's like I can barely even control if this thing ends up happening. But what you can control is you can control your inputs. You can control showing up to the gym 3 times a week. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get there. I don't know if I'm going to work out. I don't know if I'm going to walk on the treadmill. You can control getting your butt to the gym 3 times a week. That you can influence, that you can control. You can't control losing 20 pounds. I think differentiating between output versus input-based goal setting is just chef's kiss, key to also keeping your expectations really in check in terms of what you're going to do and how you're going to progress throughout your day. But the last thing I'll say in this is, back to the initial thing is like, essentially, how do you do the hard things? We don't fear doing the hard things. We fear how we feel when we're doing them. Like, getting a guest on the podcast, that's not actually difficult. How you feel about getting a guest on the podcast, that is what stops you from wanting to do it more.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, literally, like, to use the most extreme example, running a marathon is not hard. It's the shitty way you feel when you're running the marathon and you're on mile 20 and you're like out of breath and you're dying and you want to stop. That's what makes it hard. So, we are built in the bit of, again, kind of back to the fight or flight research and things like that. The research that I've done, we are built to adjust. We are built to become what we point ourselves in the direction of. But if we don't take the first step of pointing ourselves in that direction, we'll never get there. So pointing yourself in the direction is allowing yourself to do the hard thing and being okay that it's hard. Don't be in denial that it's hard, but don't let that stop you from doing it. So whatever thing, whoever's listening to this, whatever thing you're thinking about, whatever task, whatever conversation, whatever fear, whatever thought, whatever feeling is coming up, don't run from it. Allow it to be there. Like, it literally all comes back to just the fight or flight and allowing it to be there. Allow it to be there. And over time, this also goes to what I was saying about, the things don't go away. You just get better at dealing with them. When you do hard things frequently, guess what? They don't become as hard anymore because you get acclimated to them. We are built to acclimate. We are built to adjust. It doesn't always have to be hard. And then when those things become easy, new things become hard. But guess what? Those new things that are hard, that is leading you toward where you said that you wanted to go this entire time. Mm-hmm. So I think it's acclimating yourself to those things and not judging yourself for how you feel about it on the way.
Have you heard of like the upward spiral kind of technique? Yeah. So for those listening, it's kind of like setting yourself up for these small wins so that you feel that feeling of progression and moving forward and like achieving a small goal versus like what you mentioned, if you create a goal that you kind of have no control over, or you're kind of like setting yourself up for failure, that just motivates you less and less to keep going.
I think it's also like, I love what you said about you're decreasing your motivation, you're decreasing your self-confidence. That also kind of comes back to to the punishment thing. If you're setting out kind of, let's say, on that upward spiral, I think what's really important when people set goals is to have a good relationship of what happens again when you don't hit it. If you don't, you don't do it. If you set yourself, let's take New Year's resolutions, right? You set yourself up, you're like, oh, I'm going to get a gym membership. I'm going to the gym. I'm going to go whatever, And let's say even benefit of the doubt, you did set the goal the right way in terms of, you said, I'm going to show up 3 times a week. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get there, but I'm going to show up 3 times a week. Like, that's where you start. That's the the baby step along the way. Will that get you to losing 20 pounds at the end of the day? Just showing up at the gym? No, of course you have to do things when you're at the gym, but we're going to start baby steps, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say you don't do that. Let's say you get up out of bed the next morning and you're like, this was the first day I'm going to go. And you're like, oh my God, I don't want to go. I hit the snooze 30 times and then all of a sudden it's 10 o'clock and I have to do things. Like, what do I do with that? What do I do then? It's that moment and that relationship that you have with that feeling that will dictate what you do moving forward. Because if you have a punishing feeling, if you have a punishing association, a shame association with that, you will never progress forward past that moment. If you can look at that and be curious about it, I wonder why this happened. What data can I use? What information can I use to see why this happened? But also B, if you can say, I already planned for what happens when this happens. If this happens, I'm going to go on a 30-minute walk today instead. I'm not going to punish myself for it. It just happens I'm going to go for a walk today. You make these if-then arguments that I think are really, really powerful. And you can't predict everything. There's not going to be an if-then for everything. But take the most, the most common things that you would expect to happen when setting out to achieve a goal. Create an if-then for it. And I think that will hopefully protect you a little bit from the kind of the downward spiral that you could possibly have.
What techniques on the day-to-day would you do, or do you personally do, to help with those anxiety spikes, or even just try to maintain, a regulated nervous system and kind of like a grounded, calm feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing is, I feel like it's so much of this is going to be repetitive at this point, but because it really, there's so much of this that I feel like is like foundational and it all kind of branches out. But the first thing I would say, just as a general mindset, is I am grateful for the days where there is no innate anxiety popping up. And on the days where there is, That is the price I pay for the days where there isn't. Really the mindset that I try and keep, because if I didn't handle the days and the moments where it was really intense, if I didn't handle those well, then every moment would be intense. So I'm not looking at it as 50% of my days I'm really anxious. That's awful. I only get to live 50% of my life then, or I only get 50% of my days where it's really amazing and I don't feel this way. I look at it as, instead of 100% of the time feeling like crap, because I handle the 50% as well as I do, I get to feel really great in the other 50. Like, I think having that, bottom up focus mindset instead of top down, I think is really saved me a lot, just from a general perspective. On a day-to-day though tactics, there's two things that come to mind. One is the kind of the exercise of observing, right? And just like being out, kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily outside of yourself. This is here, I'm not gonna push it away, I'm not gonna throw it in the trash, I'm not gonna whatever, I'm not gonna pretend it's not there. I'm just going to put it in my purse. It's going to be there. It's going to spike up every once in a while. It's going to say hi every once in a while. It's going to, whenever I look at my purse for other things, I'm going to see it. Like, it's going to be there. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to do anything with it. So I think a general attitude of non-reactivity to it, and I know that's easier said than done, but a general attitude of observing it versus reacting to it or reacting with it could be really great. It's really great for me. The other thing that I think about, and I credit my friend, is a gut health coach, Vincent Pedre, here in the city, but he does a lot with like nervous system regulation, he says the quicker that you can get it into your body, that feeling, the quicker that you can get it into your body, the quicker it will process out. So our nervous system has an automatic response for physically what happens with the energy in our body when we are distressed, when we are having a panic, when we are feeling anything, whether joy or whether something positive or something negative. No matter what the feeling is, our nervous system has a way to process that and get that out. It takes about 90 seconds. That's not to say that there won't be like another wave of it that comes up or something like that, but getting it into your body. Now, how do you get it into your body? Grounding. Everybody has kind of a different grounding technique. The one that I like to use, again, Vincent gave me this, is really thinking of yourself as kind of a straight line from like the core of the earth, and just visualizing, I'm sitting up here, my tiny little person, I'm sitting up here, if you think about the globe, you're looking at the earth from like outer space. I'm sitting up here, I'm the tiny person. I see a direct line from myself to the center of the earth. And it almost puts you kind of, not to be woo-woo, but it kind of puts you in touch with maybe just this higher consciousness or kind of higher level of esteem in yourself, and kind of looking at and saying, oh, this one little thing that I'm worried about, there's actually so much else going on in the world right now. Like, this is only one little thing. I can be okay with this. And for me, that visualization just really kind of helps, like, literally ground me at that point. But everybody's kind of got their own thing, when it comes to grounding. I do think that is super, super valid and important, and that just kind of takes trial and error, I would say. So those are kind of the three things. Again, just kind of the general perspective of looking at it from bottom up, not top down, and then observation, and then as soon as I can get it into my body. And also too, one more note on that is, sometimes if it's literally just a day where I'm strung out, I'm literally just sitting here like, oh my God, this entire day has been like one just all day. I'll go for a run. Like, I will literally force it into my body. I'll go work out. And I think that sometimes it literally just needs like the manual push, right?
Yeah.
And so, but the sooner you can get it into your body, the sooner you can process it out. Your body is designed to help you with this. You just have to do your part. Let's put it that way. You just have to take it into the body.
Yeah. So where can people connect with you? I know you have a podcast of your own, and you actually reached out to me on LinkedIn, which I felt so like a little business girly.
Yeah, so I have a podcast of my own. It's called Redefining Growth. I use about half of it to focus on just kind of redefining business principles and what I'm learning. I literally use the podcast as a personal, like, whatever butt kick I need that day, I go make that content for myself, is literally how I think about it. So half of it's, more business focused and what I'm doing in my company. And then the other half is all of this stuff like we talked about today, personal development, anxiety, emotional regulation, etc. So it's on Spotify and Apple. And then I've got a LinkedIn, and then also my Instagram. I do a lot more content. Actually got a really big passion for specifically, oddly enough, helping gay men kind of navigate through using being gay and more of that feminine energy and more of that empathy that we kind of innately have, using that as a superpower to get ahead in the workplace and to get ahead in life, versus looking at it as like, oh, I wish I was like the big macho, masculine, whatever. And just using that to, as a superpower. So that's what I make a lot of my Instagram content on. So any of those places is
I love that so much. And I feel like, especially, things are crazy these days. And I feel like talking about things like this and just, things can feel very overwhelming in a lot of different ways. So it's just great, to see content and you doing your thing and even having conversations like this, I think it really does make a difference, and I enjoy it. So thank you so much for being here. But actually, one last question. What's your sign?
Capricorn.
Oh my god, business. Thank you so much for being here. I hope all the listeners enjoyed. I know I sure did. I'm like, can't wait to have anxiety and use the tips.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, hope this helps. But honestly, like, whoever's listening, don't sleep on just honestly advocating for yourself. Like, I literally try and spend, if nothing else, 5 minutes every single day looking up something, like using the power of the internet to your advantage. I think there's so much you can get out of the world and out of the help that's out there and books and things if you just go looking for it.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah, I love it.
Bye, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to check out Bradley. Don't forget to subscribe, comment your thoughts below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.